second. There we go. Okay, so this is AKV3. It is August the 13th. Hopefully that does not have any reason for us to have worries about today. And I'm going to paste in the chat, just so it's close to top of mind, the link to the agenda for today, as well as this document continues to have all of the notes from all of our past meetings for a number of months at this point, as well as links at the beginning to the videos of each week's meeting, in case you are just simply dying to see the next episode. And I would love to find out if anybody has been able to survive binge watching AKV3 videos, but you don't all need to jump in front of that opportunity. So welcome everybody. As far as the basic agenda, nothing radical going on. I'm in my own transition mode here of being back, really back, having finished a lot of summer things. I've got a couple updates to share that have been in some of the emails I want to make sure everybody is familiar with. And then I really want to hopefully spend a few minutes on the third and Ingram meeting that we had on Sunday, and share some of the notes that were collected from that meeting and get your input and thoughts on those notes. And then we'll touch bases with some of the projects and activities that are coming up, including the reverse pitch. So let's dive in and just do a quick check-in with everybody and find out what is new and exciting this week that you have run into that's gotten your attention. And we'll just start with Sarah, the red panda.
Funny. I'm in a cafe, so excuse the background noise. A lot I've been thinking about this week has kind of come up from a lot of my friends moving out of state recently, or planning on moving out of state recently. And when I ask them why, and I'm curious to hear like why they're moving to where they're going and why they're moving out of Alaska, a lot of the answer is just, oh, well, it's time to get out of Alaska. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, why? And is it because you haven't been out of state before? Which, if not, then I totally support that, getting out of your hometown. But it seems like a lot of it does come back down to innovation, whether or not they recognize it or not. Quality of products that you can find around here, quality of experiences that aren't just hiking the same mountains or the same trails. I guess just quality of living overall is something that seems to be popping up a lot. And so the questions, of course, that pop up for me are like, okay, well, what will it take to get to a place where we can be a leader in, creating products, a leader in the sense of like leading the industry or something people look up to, or what kind of experiences can we cultivate for the incoming generations that aren't just hiking and fishing. Not to dox those, but I'm not much of a hiker or a fisher, so what do I look forward to in a place? And it's mostly arts and culture. So how can we start innovating in that regard too, or creating ecosystems that allow innovation in arts and culture? So I'm not sure, a lot of unanswered questions, but it's more of a quality of life and what that means in the oncoming generations.
Wonderful, thanks for that. I think the issue of people leaving Alaska and people coming to Alaska is its own fascinating topic and something to dive into. Margie, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, thanks. Because I'm going to have an earbud into the ADA meeting here in 4 minutes. They're on a break right now. So this lined up well, but I was testifying this morning about how environmental social governance criteria would strengthen ADA's investments. And I'm concerned because I think what they're actually poised to do later on in this meeting is move to divest from the institutions like banks that are opposing Arctic oil. And they actually included the Fairbanks Climate Action Coalition on that list of restricted entities. So that's the ADA update and why I'm going to be a little bit distracted, but I'll keep on the Zoom because I am really sad that I've been missing a lot of these meetings and grateful to connect with you all. And I have an event that we are hosting, and it's about local investing. And I think that it'd be really powerful if AKV3 would be able to help support spreading the word for this. And it's with Michael Schumann, who was a keynote presenter at the JDC's Innovation Summit. So some of you are familiar with his work. So I pitched that to Kai. We are looking for financial sponsors. So if you know folks who would be able to come in at $100 to $1,000 co-sponsorship level, we are needing to land $4,000 in terms of co-sponsors. But most importantly, I think in terms of my ask to you all, it's about the networking and the people that you know that we can build community with to increase the capacity of local investing in Alaska so that those funds stay here instead of going outside. And I think that there's quite a bit of good framing that Michael's provided about how this is like really timely for the COVID context that we're in. And so the audience is both in terms of the entrepreneur and investor side of the equation.
Super. Margie, just two quick follow-ups for the moment. And for everybody, the link is in the agenda document that we're working from. It's down under announcements. But I'm curious, does the recording from Michael's session, is that out there from the Innovation Summit? I know some of the other sessions were recorded and there were links, and I'm wondering if that's available. It might be helpful to promote it if that link and that recording from the Innovation Summit could be shared.
That's a really good question. I've only been accessing it through the attendee, like Innovation Summit login, because I know that I was able to watch that recording initially, but if we could access that in a more publicly shareable way, that would be really helpful.
I can reach out to JEDC. I've got a good connection with their back end to find out if it's available.
Thank you. And I think Michael is planning to reach out to JEDC over the weekend, hopefully to see if they'd be interested in being a co-sponsor as well, as if they have contacts that we should reach out to. So thank you.
Dick, you just popped up on my screen. Why don't you jump in here?
All right, take a sip of tea.
I think I got you last week, I think, when you had taken a bite out of something.
I've got a follow-up question for, is it Margie or Margie?
Yeah, it's Margie. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch what the ADA thing was about that you're listening in on.
Thanks for asking. ADA is the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I didn't know what the situation was that you were referring to.
Yeah, so they're having an investment policy meeting right now. And so one of the slides that they posted on their website, and I can send a link probably to that, has a list of, I'm just trying to get to it right now so I could even screen share if it's helpful, but it's fascinating to me. It's a list of a restricted list of their portfolio analysis. And so it has a whole bunch of companies there.
I can follow up with you later too.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, the couple things, just thank you. Kai, I was actually up at the AEA ADA office yesterday for a meeting with a friend. And some of you probably aware, I wasn't aware, but some of you may be, that AEA has used some of the Volkswagen settlement funds to promote the installation of charging stations. And I know nothing about the technology. So it was a deep dive. Friend came into town and said she needed some moral support. So my wife and I went to lunch. She told us about it. And away I went. And ADA and AEA had been a client in the past, so I'm not unfamiliar with a lot of the both programs as well as the politics. But it's interesting yesterday, watching her, she had been denied funding, and she did an analysis, and she was not necessarily disputing she was disputing how they scored her in connection with the winners. And it was interesting that the people who won, it's evidence both politically aligned, which is nothing new, but also had the deep pockets from outside Alaska to fund and support at least one, maybe two of these projects that crowded out what Alaska investors were trying to put in. She could put in a good amount, but not what some of the wealthy outside people were able to put in. So it's just another one of those things that who has the most money wins again. That was on the surface. So I'm not trying to say that they were not worthy of what their ideas were. It's like, how do you create a playing field, a level playing field, when those who, print the money or have the money can make, those inroads? It was just kind of disturbing, because this person is an established, second generation Alaskan who runs a successful business and made a good-hearted effort, and yet scored higher on all the other elements, except for the amount of money she put into the effort, because she couldn't match what some of the millionaires were putting into. So anyway, that's my piece there. One other thing I want to share, and I put it in the chat, Kai, is a book written by Hal Gregerson. Some of you may have seen it, called Questions Are the Answer. Excellent. And I just offer that up for everyone to take a look. It's in the chat, 10:06 a.m.
Right.
That's good. I'm good.
Thanks, Dick, for that and for joining us. Andy, what's going on? I know you're busy with classes. What's new on the front of making Alaska a different place in the future for healthcare, or anything else interesting to you?
Well, I wanted to share something that came to mind when Sarah was talking, and that is, I remember back to when I was 18 years old, and I could not get out of my hometown fast enough. And I ran off to New Hampshire for a couple of years, rebounded to South Carolina, and then finally made my way back home again to North Carolina in time to finish out my degree at UNC. But, we don't have a lot of places for kids to ping pong here within Alaska. So I think when they get that angst to see what the world is all about, the only real option that they see is to leave Alaska, which is, unfortunate. And I just had a young friend who moved last Friday, as a matter of fact. She left for Arizona, and for no other reason than she was just tired of Alaska and needed a change of scenery. And 20 years old, and she didn't feel like there was anything here for her in Alaska. And so I see that, and I've seen a lot of changes in the 20 years that I've lived here, and I feel like there's even less to hold kids here than there was 20 years ago. And I find that just really, really sad. And so that's one reason why, like as I was saying in my Facebook post, I really want to make this this healthcare industry overview course a really engaging course for our students, because I want to encourage students to look for opportunities in healthcare here in Alaska, and stay here and find ways to grow. And I don't know that I'll be able to cover too much innovation, but I definitely will be introducing it to them. And one of the final projects they have to do is find a healthcare, some form of healthcare technology, and do a little bit of research on it. So of course, that's where my focus has been. But I'm also thinking about this potential for a class on healthcare entrepreneurship, trying to focus somewhat on helping our students who may be interested in opening, like we have, you know, our psychology students, they want to open their own practice. A class in healthcare entrepreneurship is something that would be beneficial for them. So, you know, I'm trying to figure out ways that I can combine my two worlds so I'm not pinging from one to the other, which is really messing with my brain. So, but anyway, and meanwhile, I've been doing knitting and now crocheting. So trying to get my brain to calm down because I am just off the charts with anxiety right now. So, and I know that was really kind of disconnected, but that's where I am right now.
Super. Thanks for that. And I think the issue of youth staying here, being inspired and aspiring to stay in Alaska or come back is itself a really interesting, fascinating issue that needs some more attention. Let's see, Ryan, welcome to the party.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Andy and Sarah, I can certainly resonate with what y'all have been talking about. I left my small hometown in northern Michigan to go off to university, and then as soon as I finished university, I came up here. And it's nice to go back and visit, but I have no plans of going back to live. And Alaska was very much a big city, but I'm starting to get this feeling again of like, well, where am I going? What am I going to do? What's the next thing? And as I look around, I don't see any obvious on-ramps. I don't see any places for me to get connected. And so I kind of look around and I'm like, well, what do I do? What are the options? Where can I go? And that's a challenge. And so I'm trying to figure out like, well, how do I make something of my own? What can I lean into? And so I'm certainly considering that question. So if you all have any ideas, send them my way. But I love this place, and I know that there's an abundance of opportunities, but I've been kind of feeling like we have this gap in the middle where we have some big players that are working on their big things, and they're very happy to just be by themselves. They don't want little fish to get connected with them. They don't want to talk to the little fish. They don't want to open up the channels for them. And there isn't a holding pond for the little fish to start growing. And so we end up seeing our little fish swimming into different streams and heading out of state. And I think that we're losing a lot of folks that way, and we're losing a lot of potential that way. And sometimes we can pull some of the medium and the big sized fish up, or the fish that, have a lot of energy and are willing to jump up here. We can make that leap, but I still think that we miss a lot of opportunity there. So just something that I have been.
Cool, Ryan.
I was going to say, that brings up something else I was thinking about a lot, Ryan, which it's relevant to what you were saying about on-ramps and like finding those connections, which is, I feel like a lot of people, especially my age, don't give enough to the internet and what it can actually do for you. And I know it's weird to say that younger generations don't give enough to the internet, but what I mean by that is like learning how to do things, or learning different ways that other people have done things too. I probably wouldn't have a business without the internet. And so I learned everything, just through watching others do the same thing, essentially. And so that's something else I've been thinking about too, is like maybe the opportunities aren't elsewhere. They're already in front of you. You're just not looking.
Yeah, Sarah, I think, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I genuinely believe that there is an abundance of opportunities out in the world and in our state. I think the struggle that I have been having is figuring out how to filter the opportunities and how to validate or weigh them. So I can say, well, that will work for me, that won't work for me. So yeah, but thanks, good points.
Thanks, Ryan. Elijah, welcome.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Yeah, things are good up here. I've just got this great workaway guy that's helping me wire up my whole building and finish up kitchen and building. So that's nice. Hopefully gonna be getting the thing a little more finished out so I can start supporting more people here. I have a young lady coming for some of the winter. And now I'm just trying to figure out how to really get more focused in the types of people that I'm going to be bringing in, as well as hopefully bringing in a couple of local Alaskans so that I can have a little bit more of a long-term rapport. So that's all going great for me. Sorry to hear that you're feeling a little pushed around or not networked there, Ryan. I thought we had a great time meeting at that Third and Ingress site. I think that site has a ton of potential. I'm also still kind of the resonation of group lists of talents and or availability, interest, almost like putting together like an entrepreneurial, just a group, a group of people that have different skill sets where we can say, okay, what's a good idea this week? Bang it around for a little while and see if it's worth it, or if we have the connections to put something together. I mean, there's unlimited ideas of things that can be produced and make money and create essential services for everybody, and building and networking our group to be able to look at them and explore them and potentially create them, I think is what I'm here about. So yeah, once again, just happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for everybody's time.
Cool, thanks. I put a link for folks that are interested in the workaway in the chat, as well as one of my favorite books, going back to Ryan and Sarah's comments about thinking about the paths that our lives take, a book by Catherine Bates in there. Kitty, how are things today? Anything new for us?
Morning, folks. A lot of percolating thoughts, building off of catching some of you guys Friday, Saturday, things I shared on the Regenerative Educator that deepened my thinking and my learning. And then a conversation I had yesterday with Lisa Murkowski's staffer, Angelina Estrada-Burney, who's in state for the month. And I knew her through Leadership Anchorage. She was with the very first cohort 25 years ago. So this is all percolating, and then I'm listening to you all, and yeah, so I'm in that learning mode again. Margie, thanks for the link to the event with Michael, somebody on regenerative economies. I'm gonna definitely want to participate in that and put the word out, and maybe I can even help sponsor some of it. But I tried to crystallize some of this in talking to Angelina yesterday. Kind of, Kai, you and I, it's like at our age, like what next? Knowing that I still believe so strongly in the potential here, but something I said when we were at Stickleback is about, like, in my 30 years of being in Alaska, well, 30, almost 40. First time I came here was in 82. I sense that we're going from the big heavy hitters to more and more smaller networks, and more diversity of opportunity. So that's contrary to what, like, Andy's thinking and you guys might be noticing, but it may just be the experience I bump into. But I also notice that all of those amazing, cool things going on, like Elijah, what you're doing, and like the idea of connecting people and some strategic doing, how can we link and leverage these assets? Like, I just feel like it may not yet be designed systemically for the kind of impact and influence that Margie mentioned about the investment portfolio, and like who's getting, and Dick, like who's winning is people who still have the old-fashioned thing called a big bucket of money and associated, influence. And yeah, so I was talking to Angelina about Alaska's future economy and AKV3. She was really wowed by what we're doing here. And it's like, that seems really important. And what's most powerful about what we're doing here is it's an and. It's our indigenous and our resource economies and our current and entrepreneurial potential for this other future. So while I still believe strongly in it, and I want to think about how to be more of a regenerative cultivator of the soil and the networks. I kind of resonate with what you said, Ryan, about like which avenue is really the most strategic, because I can butterfly effect all year long. And I really want to find systemic leverage points. And I have a sense of urgency around it. You know, my kids are your ages, you know, they're in their 30s and they're trying to make way here in Alaska without a huge intent to leave. But gosh, the life and choices they have as compared to when I first arrived in the 80s, it's more diverse, but it's not perhaps like, is the small network of amazing things sufficient for the quality of life? So I'm really posing new questions and I'm pondering, and yeah, and I mentioned maybe trying to get another in-person gathering down in Girdwood. I just looked at the calendar and it won't be until second half of September, so after the reverse pitch, so we can talk about that later. But yeah, so I'm hopeful with the intention of what we're doing. I just uncertain about the angle, the feng shui, the jujitsu of what really has influence. That's me. Thanks all for listening to that babble.
That's, yeah, I spent a lot of brain cycles on that question myself. Bradley, what's going on today? It's good to see you. It seems like it's been a few weeks. I hope you're doing well, and wondering what's happening with you.
Good to see you all too. Coming to you from my greenhouse. My parents are visiting from Arizona, actually, so we're shifting everybody around.
I think you've got the coolest background of anybody that I've seen in a while.
It's a little chilly, you know. I got the propane here kind of going away here, and it works though.
Nice.
Just to respond really quick to a couple things, you know, both Kitty and Andy said, you know, as a 30-something, 37, you know, trying to not leave Alaska to utilize and bring opportunity here as well. I also wonder about those inflection points, Kitty. You know, for me, healthcare is a big one. Just to kind of circle back to what Andy was talking about. You know, I'm still the only full-time employee on what I'm doing, and I'm a little bit terrified of the day when I make my first, second, and third hires and have to begin to sort through healthcare, because I want people to be able to commit and do so safely, especially, you know, if they have families to take care of. I don't have very good options as a CEO. I don't have very good options to take care of people that I want to be able to rely on and ask to rely on my company. So I think I'd like to know what options are available, what's blocking those paths, both politically and economically, how I can be a part of the solution in that. Really excited to be joining Launch Alaska's fall TDT cohort next week. Penny Gage is leading that, and super excited to see all the connections that come from that. Met some of the other cohort companies. So, you know, I hope to kind of weave all of these relationships in and figure out path forward and a way to help other companies too that want to stay up here, hire up here, build companies up here and grow. So that's what I've got going on. Thanks.
That's a lot. I'm just getting a note here on the healthcare challenge slide deck I've been keeping, because I've had the healthcare issue for startups has long been on my list of projects, and there's been a group of Southeast working on, but I need to add this onto the list. Just a second while I get it on there. Not only healthcare, but benefits in general is an issue. But there's a good thread that was in the Facebook the Alaska Startups group, a thread that was started by, I think, Ryan, about options for healthcare for startups. You might also look at that and maybe chime in and thought on it a little bit.
And I'd love to hear too, anybody, Andy, if you have any things to share on kind of what the leading edge of this is. I believe Catherine Jernstrom did some work on this a while ago to see about healthcare for co-ops and co-working spaces. And I think there were some barriers to making it happen. So I want to learn a little bit more and see how I can be helpful.
Cool. Let's see, Taylor, welcome to the group. I know that you are newer to this, and I don't know if you know everybody, and we've kind of gotten into a groove here, so you may have missed where everybody's from, but if you wouldn't mind kind of jumping into that and share a little bit about who you are and what brings you here. I know Taylor from his work in a couple different venues, but most notably recently the Alaska Ocean Cluster work, and I'm thrilled that you've been able to join us today. If you want to jump in, introduce yourself, and share a little bit about kind of this next Alaska nexus that brought you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Kai. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone. I think the only other person I know on here that I've met and talked with is Ryan. So Ryan, it's good to see you again. And I think this may be the first time we're seeing each other face to face even. Yeah, Taylor Holshouser, grew up in Eagle River, went to Yale for undergrad and came back. Kind of a bit of a startup background. My dad started a company that I helped him with in high school that made the tires on this. This is my prop gimmick for the day. Made the tires on these aircraft. RC aircraft drones, ended up having a contract with NASA, which was kind of cool. So that was kind of my first intro into the garage world of startups. Went to work for the Wilson Center as a Polar Institute fellow, and got to see kind of some infrastructure and investment stuff there. Got through the co-chairs to see some kind of family office VC deals done, and joined the Ocean Cluster in October, like Kai was saying, to build out the Build to Scale grant that we received. So that was some money from EDA we got to specifically look at helping startups in the seafood and ocean economy space. And so since May, we've had a cohort of 5 companies. We're kind of staying in stealth mode a little bit right now as we're getting stuff worked out and put together, but kind of excited to share more about that here soon. You'll see our website's going to relaunch here I think in the next month. And we're excited to kind of share more about what some of these companies are doing broadly within kind of the larger seafood company space, not so much on the state shore side, but we think there's opportunities across that. So one thing I would say is it's really cool to be with a group of people asking all the questions that everyone has asked. This is probably not a revelatory insight, but I've had lots of these questions one-on-one with people. And to hear these questions raised in a group of Alaskans with so many interesting insights and thoughts on so many challenging issues is really kind of cool. So thanks for the invitation, and I will stop talking now and continue to listen.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and appreciate you jumping into the flow of things. Be happy to back up at some point and follow up more details or information that I can do. I think just a quick note for me as far as checking in. I had a long conversation yesterday with an individual that is a fairly significant player in the investment community in Alaska, was out of state for a couple of years working in Washington, is now back here, involved with one of the native corporations leading their community investment area. He's looking for investable businesses up here in Alaska, and he's kind of saying, oh, what's happening here? You know, where's the pipeline? What's happening? And so we had a long conversation with that, and about kind of the lull that's occurred in the last couple of years after a lot of momentum that had gotten built. But on the other hand, tried sharing with him some encouraging news about things like Health Thai, Alaska Ocean Cluster getting, rolling again with a new strategy, the Launch Alaska programs, and suggesting that maybe there's some new momentum building up. He had learned about our project, AKV3, and got really intrigued. And was generally supportive, but he asked me some of these really painful questions, about, who do you have on board who's really got a lot of, significant pull and impact and standing in the community, whether it's legislatures or leaders or whatnot in there. And I had to say, I'm having some great conversations with folks like Elise Galvin or Ivy Sponholtz, but they're not stepping into this kind of space at this point. They're interested in what we're doing. Everybody's patting us on the back for doing the right thing and doing good things. But, really going to Kitty's point, they were questions that just kind of really tweaked me about, are we finding the leverage points to really do, something significant? And, I had to kind of defend the approach of not trying to jump in to do mega project type of thinking, but to try and build an organic capability to link and leverage the assets we have and start moving ahead. And, at the end of the day, he was super supportive of what we're doing and acknowledged that it was a unique contribution that we were making. But he kind of then stepped to the sidelines to say, I want to keep watching what you're doing. And the question is, who's gonna step in to do this work? And I don't know. I'm just still kind of mulling over that conversation that was, on one hand, stimulating, encouraging, but on the other hand, raised the question of how do we find that leverage point where we start getting some more significant traction with what we're doing and expand that. So I'm not going anywhere with that, other than I just kind of got tweaked yesterday for this, but also supported in continuing to go down this path, trusting that it will lead someplace.
Kai?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this Dick, interesting you bring that up, and going back to the book I was just referencing, and the question I came up with is, what would that look like if that leverage point did occur? And I don't mean to necessarily get into it right now, but that's a question that came to my mind, is if that leverage point or that person or situation, event, or that condition did occur, what would that look like? So what's the evidence? I just pose that, and I'll leave it there, and don't necessarily need to take it up, but popped in my head.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. Thanks for bringing it up and framing it. And without diving into it in detail, what I would share with you and everybody that I shared with Hans yesterday was, to me, one of the evidences that this is still real and whatnot is we keep coming back here on Fridays and we keep working on some of these issues. We keep surfacing next steps that have meaning, and we keep engaging in it. But I think you're asking a deeper question that's important, that we try and frame.
It may be as elusive as trying to figure out Alaska's fiscal plan.
Well, it's an excellent point, because as much as I sometimes get tweaked by others on things like that, the reality is even the big players doing the big deals ain't getting shit done. So for any of those folks to challenge us on what we're doing and what we're accomplishing, when you see, the rest of the stuff, you realize that it's all kind of an illusion of grandeur and size. But the reality is, I think some of the things we're doing are as significant as anything else. But at any rate, I digress. No, I don't digress. I need to proceed on watching the clock here. A couple announcements I've put in the links here. The article that Kitty was mentioning about the regenerative economy and regenerative educators is definitely a worthwhile read. I really think it was, for me, jumping into about the third part where they got into this concept of regenerative education was where it really was kind of rattling my cage, and is a valuable perspective to read in there. So the link is there. The Art of Powerful Questions from the Alaska Humanities Forum is coming up in September. I highly recommend it. I've been through it. I think it's a really powerful way to spend a day or day and a half program. The link is in there for that session. Kitty has offered, and I'll join in this effort. If any of you are interested in doing this, can make the time. But if the cost of it is an issue, let us know. We'll make sure that you can get there, because the program is well worth it. You'll find that the discussion about how to frame questions and help lead conversations is invaluable for any work that you do. It will be helpful for our work in this group, but you'll find that you can use it at home. You can use it with your businesses. It simply helps you think about how to engage people in questions that really bring the discussion to a more significant level. Can't recommend it enough. And then finally, the link is also there for this Regenerative Economy program. Michael Schoon's work is really interesting, because he really convinces you about the power of investing locally and the economic impact that it has. And what he does is he breaks down the fallacy of thinking that investing locally doesn't have any real impact because it's just stirring dollars. And what he shows you is that it actually is a higher leverage point for economic growth than the elusive invest outside or do the typical business attraction type of efforts of our economic development. So it's a good program. I saw him at the Innovation Summit. There's going to be a free session to introduce him, I think around September, don't remember, maybe the 14th. And then there's a paid program that he's going to be doing once a week, I believe, for about 4 weeks. I'll try and continue to promote that, but if you see links or information about it, please take a look at it. Please also help share this with others. And I think you'll find it's a significant part to the discussion about what's next for Alaska, and that includes the issue of strengthening our own internal economy and support for businesses. I was just yesterday with an entrepreneur downtown, and they're struggling trying to find Alaskan businesses that support their growth of a business that is selling out of state, but they can't find local players to support their business. So Michael's program is excellent. Okay, any quick questions or anything? Because what I'd like to do now is jump straight into spending the time we have left today looking at the information from the Third and INGRA discussion on Sunday. But I want to pause for a second to see if folks want to raise any questions or issues before I jump in.
I just wanted to say one thing on what Dick was saying. I agree. I mean, I think that what he was phrasing there is the same thing that, you know, a young entrepreneur would get is, okay, this is a good idea. When you get the money, what are you going to use this money for? Or when you get this leverage, you know, who are you going to, you know, coerce into, you know, this project that you guys want to do or something like that. So it's really getting more focused and, you know, having an executable plan, or at least the start of something like that. And that's it. That's all I have.
Wonderful analogy. Thank you. Okay, there are 2 links I'm going to share with you. The first link, for those of you that can get into Miro, is a link that allows you to edit the board if you want to play in the board. The second link I'm going to put in there is a viewing link for those that don't want to deal with the vagaries of trying to get access if you don't have it. And I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen and go over the stickies from the meeting here. So you have 3 ways to participate. The first link is an edit link. The second link is a view link, and then you can just hang out and watch what's on your screen, which may be hard to see, but hopefully will work, and I'll try and move around and zoom in. So to kind of tee it up, Ryan, do you want to take just a second and kind of tee up your perspective of the meeting that we had, and then I'll kind of take it back for a second and kind of explain what I've done with the stickies, and then what I'd like to do is have a discussion with folks about these stickies and what they might mean and what we might do with them. But Ryan, you want to take kind of a high level introduction to the Third and INGRA meeting for folks that weren't there?
Yeah, thank you, Kai. Well, I would like to take a quick moment to thank the brave souls that showed up on Sunday and stuck it out in the rain. We ended up having a really wonderful conversation. We threw up some tents and got ourselves out of the rain. And then it was fantastic to see people face to face. I really want to emphasize how powerful and impactful that can be, and encourage us to do that again in the near future. After getting a chance to say hi to everyone, we talked a bit about Alaska version 3. We talked a little bit about the site and the work that is happening on the site, and framed in some of the potential for what could be. There has been a pretty significant community planning effort that has gone together through the EPA Local Foods, Local Places grant initiative that was led by Liz Hodges-Snyder, in addition to the work that was done by the Heritage Land Bank to pull together a community plan. And so there's some potential pathways that largely have the same items on the site, but look at a broader perspective there's some opportunity for how specifically things get laid out and built out. After exploring the potential for the site and what could be there, we then came back together and had a conversation around Alaska Version 3. What are some of the investable opportunities that we see? What are some of our values as an organization? And just sort of had an organic conversation that then captured people's thoughts and comments on sticky notes. And so it looks like Kai has been kind enough to translate those sticky notes from physical form into virtual form and get them on the Miro board. And so that's what he was sharing with us.
Cool. So the stickies that we collected during discussion were generally around a discussion about values related to AKV3, but it kind of went in a couple different directions. And I've attempted to try and gather these up into a couple different sections. And I'll just share them with you kind of at a high level, and then we can kind of go where you may want to go with that. Over towards the left, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit for those of you that are just looking at the screen share. There's a section of these that are over in this block that I'm just put a box around that kind of dealt with the questions of how AKV3 works and kind of the underlying engine there. And that's kind of a poor way of trying to capture it, but it talked about capacity building, focusing in on catalyzing action and energy, looking at how to link and leverage and align and be a catalyst, those kinds of things that kind of were kind of the, like I said, to me, they kind of speak to the engine of what we're doing. There's another section over here that I'm going to put another box around now, kind of in the upper middle, that was a series of thoughts that were captured on the stickies that talked a little more about the values of how we do the work, or the values that come to our engagement. So it talked about being reliable, replicatable. There was something in there about being, cultivating trust and accountability, being solutions oriented. And it's really kind of similar to the first block, but it was slightly different in terms of the first block was a little more about leveraging things and creating, something bigger than ourselves. The other one was kind of more about, some values internally. Not a perfect description, but my starting point. There's another group in here now in the middle bottom that was a really fascinating area. And I think in here is a pot of gold for us. And this was the discussion that came up in a number of different threads through the afternoon discussion about the role of bringing together the voice of the elders and the voice of the youth in terms of collaborating. And we've talked before about a framing question related to how do we bring the energy, the voice, and the opportunity of Alaska's next generation into being the leaders of this next economy in our next generation, rather than waiting for the elders to figure it out, the folks down in Juneau that are going to beat each other up over this. And it also talked about this issue of understanding that elders may not know how to be elders, and youngers may not know how to be youngers anymore, because we don't have the traditions of this kind of way of working together. We also talked about the nature of true elders versus economic elders. We tend to hold up those folks that are, tall, white-haired, and financially successful as somehow our elders that might lead us. And they may not be the ones that are the ones that we need to bring forward. At any rate, there's a whole range to me of energy around what could AKV3 do to look at this issue and to build something around this as a part of how we get to that next Alaska discussion. So I was really enthused by that. But let me get to the rest of the summary here. There's another block here that I'll put a box around now that was a little bit more, I'd say roughly, it's kind of, elements of that next Alaska, both capturing the idea that we don't want to simply create another part of the lower 48 and replicate another Chili's restaurant and another opportunity for a lower 48 chain store to be successful here. We want to figure out how Alaska is this unique place. But there are also other issues that I kind of loosely put in here. I'm not sure they belong here, about the shift from the big mega projects, about how scale is changing. But on the other hand, we talked about how Alaska just loves big projects and whatnot. So at any rate, kind of a loose set of issues that to me are kind of tied to, what is the next Alaska piece about. There was another set of ones here. I'm moving around over here to the lower right now. that was specific ideas related to the third and ingress site. The idea that maybe that could be one of our keystone projects that we've talked about. The idea that the site could be a place for early stage innovation and activities. Talked about the potential that this site has. It has amazing potential to do that. So there were issues recognizing that site. And there was a couple more loose ends that I've got up here about not trying to write down the plan, about being climate change prepared. Who are we without oil? That are maybe more tied to the next Alaska. So I'm going to kind of shift them down there right now. The final thing I wanted to say, and then I'm going to pause for Ryan and others with questions, thoughts, or if you want to move any of the stuff around, please. Somewhere right in here, here it is. This one, I'm going to turn this one some sort of, let's be provocative, some sort of purple color. This one was, for me, probably one of the most important comments that came out of the discussion. And that was in discussing what we could do to try and have an impact in Alaska. There was this discussion that began with kind of trying to get along with everybody and trying to, look at all the different elements and players. And what came out of that discussion was the word provocative as a way to describe the kind of catalytic work we could do. That is to not necessarily, creating conflict, but on the other hand, being provocative, asking interesting questions that get people involved and keep people involved in this opportunity to create this next Alaska. And in that provocative nature, sometimes kind of tweaking folks maybe a little bit and kind of making folks uncomfortable with some of the things that might be going on and some of the opportunities, but getting them to really think clearly and break down some of the barriers. I'm putting maybe more into this comment than was said actually at the meeting, but I really appreciated whoever brought that up, and the discussion was around that about the power of what we could do. So let me pause. Ryan, is there anything you want to clarify or add into this, or Kitty or anybody else was there? And then I'd be welcome to kind of let this go where folks want to in terms of comments, questions, or if you're in this and you want to move things around or put some titles in some of these groups or regroup them a different way, please do. But that's enough for me for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Kai. I think that's an excellent summary and grouping of the conversation that we had. The provocative comment really stuck out for me as well, because I had been thinking of Alaska version 3 as being neutral. And what I realized while thinking about that comment is that while we were trying to be neutral in the sense of not necessarily providing a solution or saying this is the direction that we're going to go, that there's a real opportunity in our community to leverage the conversations that are already happening and encouraging people to take action, but to really act as that catalyst, to be provocative in that thinking. And so that was a really nice reframe for me.
Okay. Can I ask a question in terms of distinctions here in the discussion? Is there any distinction between Next Alaska and AKV3? Are they used somewhat interchangeably?
Fair question, and I kind of bounced between the two. There was some early history on the naming of the organization that put us where we're at this point. But I generally think of AKV3 as kind of the name of the organization, as well as kind of a framing of this next economy. And to me, the next Alaska is kind of the underlying question that's motivating this whole thing. The idea of talking about what is the next Alaska doesn't necessarily have the answer that requires that we have a new value-added economy. The next Alaska could, for some people, be that we have refilled the pipeline. But I want to get people thinking about what is the next Alaska. AKV3 kind of takes it a step further, suggesting that there is a new third economic era for our state. So that's kind of a gray answer to a good question that is still, I think, being developed over time and reflects kind of a naming issue that came about early on about, was this going to be called Next Alaska or was it going to be called AKV3? And both names have been kind of hung around.
Okay. I guess, as a follow-up for me, the big question I have kind of in response to all this discussion is, what are the asks of AKV3, just like the question at the end of the 1 million cups, what does AKV3 want from this community? And to me, there are some very real parts of making Alaska's next economy, whatever that is, a little more accessible. I know there's a manufacturing company that had to leave Anchorage because of the inventory tax that we have here. And that inventory tax is a relic of this as a railroad camp. So, can that be an ask of those that would begin to sort of change some of those systems and rules? That's an open question to you, Kai, and to the group. Because I think, the neutrality question, I never imagined AKV3 being neutral. I always thought it would advocate for policies and for ways of doing business that do bring about that next economy.
Yeah, fair question. The thing that, to me resonates with what you said is, I think there's a fundamental question that has not been answered, and I keep pushing it away as it comes up is this an advocacy policy group that starts creating policy initiatives and specific agendas, and then starts working to promote that agenda? Or is it an effort to try and engage people in these questions and to empower and support them and all of the related groups that might be tied in with us to pursue their own agendas and questions? And at what point do we start becoming an advocacy group as opposed to potentially an education, involvement, and empowerment group? And so far, my own bias has been to stay away from starting to advocate a particular position because of my concern that it would start putting us into a box someplace. And, my interest for a long time has been to avoid us being put into anybody's box of being a good guy or a bad guy kind of player. And that includes why, I kind of drug my heels along for a while about us even becoming a real organization. Because as soon as we were a real thing, we'd be either, friend or foe. Alaska is a terribly, dangerous place to do work in terms of organizations and relationships because of our approach. But you ask a good question, both of, what is the ask of AKV3 as well as what is our role in potentially pursuing or advocating for a particular solution. And that's just kind of background without giving you a really clear answer.
Let me chime in, see if I can be succinct in my thinking. So on the heels of this last week, sort of what I've read, what I'm listening to, conversations I'm having, I do feel like there's a leverage point that calls for scale, even while I'm the one who's been sort of saying often, I feel like it's a world of smalls now. But I also think, to Kai, your comment, I really like the idea of perhaps the impact that the inflection point that AKV3 offers is the invitation to connect across the many agendas to get link and leverage, so that, it all comes down to what gets done. We do want things to get done. We just don't have the agenda. What we believe in strongly is that the potential can be far greater than what it is if we can help Alaska rise and aspire and connect and leverage the resources to do the good things. It's like, so for me, it's a capacity building endeavor. And also, I think explicitly a connecting space. And now I'll leap into an idea, and I have too many of these. I'm the worst butterfly brain, but an idea this brings me back to is something that I heard about Australia did a decade or more ago, called the Big Conversation. And I looked at the mind map here on Miro, brought myself back. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much good thinking that's already been done by this group. What if we could really invite a committed group of the network of networks to engage in a statewide series of dialogues where everybody has their own agenda, but they are willing to at least lean into the V3 question, the V3 provocative question. Who are we together that we need to be for this next version? then from there, so that could be our one keystone initiative, which is to connect and catalyze an at-scale conversation in Alaska that you'd have to have your head in the sand to not know is going on, you know, and it's rippled. I mean, back when Alaska 2020 was being done by the Alaska Humanities Forums, I reread that report because you had it posted somewhere. And I was like, wow, okay, that definitely shows old thinking. But I do recall the momentum behind the conversations. It's out of date. It's very back to sort of the big few oil industries and the old fashioned economies. It's all deep in the measures and the processes, but the way in which they engaged Alaskans has not been done since. And there was a sampling of it, friends have told me, when they participated in the transition team efforts of the Malott Walker administration, which was nonpartisan because of the way they came together. And the 150 or so people who were there, everyone I've talked to said, oh my gosh, I would participate in that conversation again and again and again, because it was not about tearing down what we don't like about the other party. It was like building on everything that's working in service of what's next. So the idea is something like Australia's big conversation, where we could get the scale and really strengthen the connections through conversations around provocative questions, and let those actions and connections spark policy changes in terms of the supply tax thing. How stupid is, you know, it's like there's so many things, but we're so dispersed and we don't have any, yeah, so that's an idea. And a bottom line is I feel our role is in that building the regenerative capacity for all of these things to happen, but to do this at a different scale than what we're at right now with our fractured networks. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I mean, I think that comment is worth giving it a minute to breathe, but just recognizing the time, I want to just keep pushing forward. You know, there are a lot of good organizations and good people that are doing good work and impactful work in this state. And Kitty, I think that speaks to the sense of small that you have been pointing out. There's a lot happening, but it isn't connected. It isn't linked together. And I think that's where we can really build up some momentum, is by serving as a way to help align folks. And so to Bradley's question of working on a tax initiative, it sounds like that's a worthy initiative to work on. But I don't know that I would picture Alaska version 3 taking the charge on that. I think that they would be a better fit for getting people who are interested and invested in the outcome of that question and conversation together, and then helping to find some resources and ways that they could make a difference in that. You know, I'm very cautious to abdicate power at the individual level. I think that the people independently working on things, or not independently, but like collectively as people working on it, is great. But I think that there can be this othering that happens where it's like, oh, well, Alaska version 3 is the one that's going to work on that. We don't really have to get involved. And, you know, thinking of strategic doing, it's not like what other people are going to do. It's what are you going to do? What are you going to bring to the table? What could we do? What should we do? What will we do? And so getting folks to work on that and work together could be a really powerful driver for us.
It's just a little bit after 11, and always these meetings could go much longer if we could. I'm not in a hurry, but I want to pause for a second to acknowledge that some of you probably need to jet and see if there are any loose end comments on that, on anything.
Yeah, Kai, and everyone, some of you are probably aware of this. Kitty, you may know this. What I put in the chat area, there's a link. I got this. I was a part of this. I don't know if any of you might have been a part of this. This was way back, even prior to 2020. This was something put together. I think Governor Hickel and Malcolm Roberts and some others movers and shakers back then, put together through the, I think the Humanities Forum might have been involved. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but there was a group of about, oh goodness, maybe 200, 250 people at Captain Cook over a couple days. And the report, I got it from Ken Osterkamp, who now is at 4 Acre. And it came over from AARP, but Ken was the director of Alaska 2020. And there's a link to the report, and there's quite a few pieces there. But Ken would be a good person to chat to about what happened there. And the report is there, and there's various levels, but it kind of ties into some of the discussion we've been having here. Here we go again, right? Let's gather up everyone and have this chat. So, and so we head out again, and I'm on board. I'm ready to go too. Anyway, I wanted to share that.
Well, Dick, would you mind helping get me connected with Ken and that discussion?
Sure, will do.
That would be great. I think it'd be interesting to do. And the
You know, I joined that conversation, and Ira Perman was at the Humanity Forum when that was going on. So I remember it well. And it's not do it over again. It's like learn from what really worked,
yeah,
and how it can be sustained, and how today's economy, population, innovation can shift, and honestly, how this kind of technology of working virtually enable us to do something that we couldn't even do back then.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We may think we're zoomed out, but we are much better prepared to connect across distance in Alaska than we ever were, years back. So
yeah,
it would be great to learn from it.
Yeah, I think I was either just off or coming onto the Humanities Forum board when that happened. I lose track of my timeline here.
Yeah.
That's a great opportunity. Well, we'll see, Dick, if you can help me get connected to Ken, and maybe we can have a discussion, maybe even invite him one of these Fridays to share with us a little bit about the process, what they learned, and his thoughts on, what it would look like to build off of that into the future. There was the report, I think, is that Dick's referring to, is also on our website. I think I'd previously added that to some material that Pasquale was going to curate in the collect portion of that. Anybody have anything else for the good of the discussion at the moment? I know we're just kind of really getting into it, but it's also getting late in this time. Other final thoughts or any final asks of anybody that you'd like to wrap up today with?
I'll offer a provocative question for people to ponder for at least a week. And it's probably not as artfully crafted as it would be if I was fresh out of my training with the forum. But I think, who can we invite in a committed way to be the beginning of a large conversation, a large and inclusive and innovative conversation across our state about our future? Who do we know who, when we make the ask, the invitation, they would say, yes, I will commit to exploring the idea of this? Because again, there's a lot of networks. You got to get the attention of these people who have their own agendas, and they're working hard on these really important things, to say, why would I also, on top of what I'm trying to do, take the time and the effort or try to mobilize my constituency to show up and be part of this? So who could we reach out to, and how might we begin that invitation?
Good question to leave to continue working on. Thank you. I got some ideas on that. The other thing that I want to just also leave you with is to ponder the issue of this youth elder opportunity. I still also think there's an interesting layer in there that's a different issue from the conversation issue that Kitty's talking about, but it's still sticking out to me as something that's interesting for us to do. Go for it, Kitty.
Well, the Youth and Elders Conference every fall, and I think they're having to do it virtually again this year. And we could talk to First Alaskans and see how we might both learn from all the years they've been doing their youth and elders work, and also infuse it maybe with some V3 questions. It's just, build off what's out there. There's always something going on that's in the neighborhood, and that one's coming up.
Yeah,
Is that Alaska Native specific?
Well, it's hosted by First Alaskans. It's attended by predominantly natives, but it's open. And that, I think, is one of the questions, is how do we make this not just strong for the indigenous community, strong for all Alaskans? And, if that's, how do we partner up? How do we, that's not an answer, but yeah.
An observation that I have along those lines, it's probably too winded for today's conversation, but the very short nugget version of it is my partner is today 75 years old, but still very active in the community, and he's a flight instructor. And he's been having really significant issues with another flight instructor who is 25 years old. And a lot of it has to do with the young guy not respecting the fact that he has the experience that he has. And, as a matter of fact, he was just given an award by the FAA for 50 years of safe flying. And so he feels like he's earned his place. And he's being disrespected by a young kid who is of the mindset, if we listen to the AEDC guest speaker or keynote speaker, they look at respect very differently, and they want to be respected before they give respect. So I think that needs to be, that gap right there needs to be addressed. And maybe the generations that are in between the boomers and the current generation are kind of incrementally, we kind of understand where the elder generation's coming from, but the newest generation may not necessarily make those connections. We've played the telephone game too many times. And so, I mean, that's just something that I'm thinking about and I'm watching, and it's been, and it's not that Terry hasn't had, he's got lots of very young friends who do respect him and his experience in the world and what he brings to it. So, it's not like a gap that he has with everybody, but it's definitely a gap that he's having with one person who's trying to gain power before he really has the experience to have the power that he wants. So, it's a gap that I'm watching right now and gaining some perspective on. So, perhaps in some time I might be able to kind of bring that into an addressable conversation that could be had between youth and elders, and understanding what that gap really is. So that's really all I have to contribute on that right now.
Good. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here. I'm not going